Leonard Fournette is teammates with Tom Brady. We got a guy named James Robinson leading a running back depth chart already. Chaos is sure to ensue in Jacksonville. And we've got David Njoku, tight end 3 on his own positional team's depth chart. Boy, Jordan, sounds like we are ready for week 1, my friend. And welcome to the Footballguys Dynasty Show. I'm your host, Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And there's a crackle in the air, is there not? I mean, we are about 48 hours away from kickoff officially, and the fire hose, as Sigmund Bloom likes to say, is about to be thrust upon our potentially, where there's smoke, there's fire. That could be a lot of our patient level in terms of let's get some football, ladies and gentlemen. And here we are for 2020. Bound to be a roller coaster ride, but we're going to be here every step of the way, every single week here on the Footballguys Dynasty Show, because the twists and turns, they are a-coming.
J.D. McKissick is the starting running back in week 1. That's the most 2020 statement of all time.
Yeah, exactly. How many Dynasty GMs knew James Robinson? Be honest, before a couple weeks ago. To be fair, I loved his profile back in March. I thought he warranted day 3. He went undrafted, but apparently, and I know you've already made a couple of references, Jordan, to Doug Marrone on maybe not trusting those the rational coaching lines that we assume rational coaching lines we like to use. But apparently, James Robinson was an impactful part of the decision to let top 5 pick Leonard Fournette go in a contract/walk year.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's. We'll see how much longevity there is in that, right? I mean, we look at pedigree. We know that UDFAs, it's really hard to hit. And we know that there's not a ton of density and a ton of allegiance. So you don't need a lot out of a competing player for them to have better odds than just a blanket UDFA. So I'm with you in terms of big guys that can move. I like James Robinson. That's a profile that we tend to gravitate towards. I liked him coming out, was surprised that he went undrafted. So that he could come in and make an impact wasn't shocking to me. I had a home league this weekend where it's a keeper, sort of not really full dynasty, but it's 16 teams. We keep 7. So it feels very keeper. It feels very dynasty-ish early on in the rookie draft. And, like a 4th, 5th round, Devonta Freeman was out there, and I was like, I know he's in Jacksonville right now, and like stranger things have happened. I thought that was going to happen. And so the fact that it doesn't, and now it lands up with James Robinson, that was surprising to me, given that I just assumed that they were going to get Devonta Freeman. So we'll see on that. I mean, it's interesting. There's a couple of these with him and J.D. McKissick, and maybe that takes air out of the balloon that is Antonio Gibson's.
Does it, Jordan?
Dynasty star.
Does it really?
If he's not at 101, I don't think it's taking the air out of it yet, right? I mean,
I was gonna say let's play. I mean, if J.D. McKissick or Peyton Barber is the reason Antonio Gibson does not do whatever it is he is capable of doing this year, boy, they are playing out of their cleats because we know what Peyton Barber is. We can like him as a player, but he has sucked up some carries and touches in the NFL, probably more than you would justify normally for a guy of his lack of pedigree, even though he has some positive traits. And McKissick, he was unemployed. He's on his 4th, 5th team. It seems like maybe he oscillates between Seattle and another team, like back and forth.
Detroit, right?
Maybe that's Detroit. Yeah, all those silver and blue teams. I think I just offended them. There's no way both of those. Like, what are your team colors? Blue. it probably is like Pelican. It's probably like Pelican Aqua for the Seattle Seahawks helmet and everything. But yeah, like James Robinson. It's interesting because honestly, I wouldn't be as optimistic or, buying into this running back one for the first week of the season talk. But, again, trust the giver of such information. But, Marrone came out and said Armstead could be out a while. And this is his 2nd trip to COVID list, right? And so a while could be 2-3 weeks, a while could be 6 weeks. I mean, who knows what's going on there, but I was firmly on, you bet on the pedigree. Armstead was there. Armstead was the guy taking snaps away if someone actually was doing that from Leonard Fournette last year. So to me, he was the high probability bet. One thing I did say last week or two was on other platforms was saying that, Divine Ozigbo was the the name of the moment. And I was like, I actually like James Robinson better. That was one take I had. People were bidding, 5, 10, 15, 20% of their budget. And I was like, first of all, that's suicide. Just light those things on fire. Like the fact that people are chasing situational running back potential without pedigree or anything like that before week 1 by spending that percentage of your waiver budget this year, to me, is just like waiver suicide. So, so James Robinson, I was like, I actually like the profile better, and I bet you can get him for $1. And those are my favorite waiver bids, $1. You get them for $1, or maybe you bid 2. Maybe you really like them. You bid 2. I'll sit there sometimes, Jordan. I don't know about you. Like you sit there spinning your mustache. You're like, 1 or 2. Ooh, or 1 or 0. Like if 0 is a possible one, you're like 1 or 0. I like to get in there early, put that 1 or 0 bid and be like, you know what? I got all tiebreakers over you. Everybody that bid $1, I got you over because I did it right on Monday night.
Yeah. What's just as a strategic point, what do you think a guy like James Robinson, I'm assuming that medium to shallow leagues, he's available. What do you think is a reasonable number right now to put on a percentage wise of a fab budget for him right now?
Again, I can't really think of a player. I mean, I've put together some waiver lists for this week and done my own already before this show because, it gets away from you Tuesday night into Wednesday. You can easily forget about it. So, I kind of do it early side. And I'm not really going above 3 to 5% on anybody right now of reasonable at this depth, likely to be available. I just didn't do it this week. I mean, I've got other running backs, honestly, that I think big picture of like, what's the floor here of like they're an injury away. I know that it was clarified in the past 7 to 10 days. I feel much better about a $3 out of 100 budget bid on those types of players than I would on, because again, what's a hit in Jacksonville's backfield, right? Okay. Let's take Chris Thompson out of it. And I don't even know. Let me ask you directly. I mean, do you think Chris Thompson, big picture this year with how things sit, everyone's healthy, whatever, is he the most valuable PPR guy here?
I mean, assuming he's healthy,
yeah,
probably.
No,
but
until he's not healthy,
right? I mean, yeah. I mean, I would think that he would be the guy that you would be most apt to start, right? That he would be the highest ranked guy, for example. So. But
for the other guys to be viable, for the other guys to put up, let's go A-warp. Like for the other guys to put up actually it matters in your lineup type number. It would have to be multi-touchdown, right? Pretty much.
Yeah.
Based on what we know and assume about Jacksonville's offense. And Leonard Fournette couldn't do this. Keep in mind. Right? I mean, people think that he had a horrible year. He couldn't find the end zone. Do we really think this iteration of the offense is going to be that much better? Now that, again, they don't have Fournette, they're going to have probably some sort of carry committee. And then Chris Thompson, he could be catching 5, 6, 7, 8 passes any given week. And there's a lot of potential in that as like a running back 2 flex floor play sort of thing. So I don't know. To see James Robinson rip off 120 yards and a touchdown and catch 2 or 3 passes. Is it possible this week? Sure. But it's possible. We're flying in unknown. And he's one of those guys. I just know that if we had the preseason, first of all, he'd be owned before now because we probably would have seen him in the second half. He probably would have done some positive things. Now, all of a sudden, he's playing right behind Fournette with Armstead out, or like you would have seen. I love those progression sort of things. It doesn't happen with every team, but I really missed that this year, and I hope we get back to it next year of some sample size so that we can see these guys. I mean, James Robinson, his first rep for our eyes is going to be week 1, potentially getting the first snap of the game.
Yeah, if we know anything from Doug Marrone, it'll be a pretty vanilla 1st and 10 run up the middle, for maybe a 2-yard gain to set up a manageable second and 8. If he wants
to get spicy, he's going to go B gap.
And then, that's what we're thinking.
Yeah, and then the departed guy is Leonard Fournette, and boy, I mean, to think that so now it's talk of a solid roll week 1. And to me, that would be if I didn't hear anything, if it was just chat a little bubble, no outside, information, and you lay out the events of the past 7 to 10 days, and you go, what happened? What's the rotation week 1? And I would say Leonard Fournette gets the most touches because you know what? Why do you bring him in? This is sort of the Adrian Peterson premise, right? Like, the Saints view differently, but why would you bring in a guy like Adrian Peterson, for example, and not give him significant work? And maybe that's why they let him go from Washington this year. But Leonard Fournette, I don't know. Ronald Jones, we can like him as a sleeper. We can like him as saying, there's better things to come from him, but they didn't think Fournette was going to be available. Here he is. He's a workhorse. And if there's a workhorse answer there, I want it. And it's Leonard Fournette, and I want him. I think there's tremendous upside this year.
Yeah, I mean, that offense, pick your poison, right? I mean, we know that running the ball isn't the most, effective way to go about scoring points. But you got Evans, Godwin on the outside. You have Gronk, and maybe it's even situational or a full role. We'll see how that all goes. But you look at Fournette last year. He had 8 carries inside the 5-yard line, -2 yards, and he actually had 3 touchdowns. So if you look from the inside the 10-yard line, he had 15 touches without a carry. So basically between the 6 and the 10-yard line, without a touchdown. So and if you look inside the 20, right, all of his touchdowns, his 3 touchdowns were inside the 5 last year. He had basically 35 touchdowns from the 6 to 20-yard line that he had 0 scores on. He was amongst the worst in terms of yards. Actually, Nick Chubb had -14 yards inside the 5-yard line, but him and Chubb were by far the worst. I mean, you can't key on him, right? With Evans and Godwin and OJ Howard and Gronk and Brady. Like, you can't key on him. And
fear the passing game. Don't fear Fournette in that offense is what death by 1,000 paper cuts it might be, going down the field if you play it that way, but it certainly is slower.
Yeah. But and just it's the thing has always been with him, right? What I find funny is the narrative, and heck, maybe I'm wrong, but he gets run out of Jacksonville. I don't think that's necessarily about his talent. I could be wrong. I think it has to do with other things. But he goes to this situation, and the knock was, he's never going to repeat the receiving numbers, and which is kind of comedic considering where we were 12 months ago. But
saying he'll never get the receiving numbers,
right. I mean, it's funny how those narratives change, right? You got to go from one extreme to the other. But really, to me, it was he'll never get those rushing numbers again. It's virtually he can't get those rushing numbers and reproduce that. It's just going to be better, has always been my thought. Even if the receiving numbers come down in this offense, I mean, they're talking about a quote situational, he'll be involved and it'll be a situational thing. Isn't that the type of scenario in this offense that could run in for 10 carries touchdowns for 45 yards and 2 touchdowns on week 1, right? I mean, that bangs in double-digit touchdowns, and and ultimately, I mean, you and I like Ronald Jones.
That's going to roll. Let's not assume that if he does that early on, that it won't grow. That will not, week 1, like you said, 10 carries for 46 yards, a touchdown, and 2 catches. Let's not I don't pretend like, week 1 sample size is 100% of the sample size, and this is what the season will be. No, he just got there. He already had time to take pictures with Brady and everything. But it's like to think that 2 weeks after that, he could be up to 18 touches. I mean, and I mean, here's a tongue-in-cheek thing I wanted to ask you, Jordan. And it's quasi-rhetorical. In relation to his level of competition, when's the last time he even had average quarterback ability? High school?
Did you see his quote?
I don't. Yeah, no, I know
his quote about Brady.
Yeah. So I mean, again, we know in Jacksonville, not close. LSU, this is pre-Burrow, which I think has changed. Might change a lot of the recency bias or thought process people have with this. But they were an S show at quarterback. I mean, they had Beckham and largely wasted Beckham and Landry on the same team. So I mean, LSU again, they were 50 years in the rear view of the kind of offense they were running when Fournette was there. So this is going to be, high school is the kind of competitive advantage situation he has the potential for this year. So he's a runway guy. And I got to think with just a little lighter box and more attention looking elsewhere, and all those factors. Again, a runway guy that he can glance off of guys, he'll run right into you, and again, at 230 plus pounds, truck stick. And there is a ton of upside that, frankly, I think the high end outcome here is what we haven't seen it Leonard Fournette in the NFL yet, is what possibly could be the upside here. Because 25, he's right in his peak right here. And you're giving him a really good offense where he's going to be third, fourth fiddle.
Yeah, and you know what the crazy part is? We can maybe nitpick about where LeSean McCoy is at this point in his career, but between him and Ronald Jones, him and Keyshawn Vaughn, who's the guy that's actually been targeted, right? That has had a high level. It seems crazy to say, thinking about where we were last year and the narrative on him, but he had an immense passing roar. We could say that maybe it wasn't the most efficient and it probably wasn't the offense for it, but he does have the opportunity to grow and I think could conceivably be the best running back in both facets, right? I think he can clearly be the best runner. And we'll see what McCoy has left, but I think between him and Ronald Jones, at least we know that Leonard Fournette can actually catch, so we haven't seen that out of Ronald Jones at any point. So I think it's really interesting. And honestly, if you were to say, hey, he's going to be involved situationally early and that situation grows, they have to get into the playoffs, but their aspirations lie down the road, right? This isn't, I don't think that the offense that they're going to run out here in week one is necessarily the offense that we're going to see in October, November, December, and ultimately for them into January, right? So that Fournette could grow into a role down the stretch of the season. And heck, maybe it's even more of a tandem and they keep him fresher than he's been in his career. That could pay off big time later on in the season.
Paint the picture over the next 2 to 3 months and what your attached action plan is for Keyshawn Vaughn. Let's let's project that he is the loser here in terms of not seeing him much. He's firmly behind the other guys, whether that's running back 3 or 4. Let's just say it's an anemic start from a guy that was getting a lot of situational buzz when he was drafted here. So we got a day 2 running back. There are some positives. Like, I think the biggest thing that we had discussed together was don't like the profile don't like the profile for the price, that it was a lot of situation. And so what would you, in terms of, you're going to be a vulture, you're going to circle, you're looking for a secondary market discount on Keyshawn Vaughn. How many weeks do you think it takes? And what are going to be some of the types of offers you explore, because you're still buying on the rebound a day 2 running back with some positives, but now highly discounted?
Cost is everything in this world. And I think, when you look at, when you go down the line and look a little bit at some of the hit rates and some of these things, when you get into the second and third round of rookie drafts, right? If you get 33% shot at a hit rate, that's actually pretty good in terms of the hit rate in those ranges. I mean, you might expect, something in the quarters to a third, right, of a hit rate in there. And if you look at what's interesting about Keyshawn Vaughn is I don't think there's a ton committed on this roster past this year, right? Maybe Fournette, right? If the Fournette experiment doesn't go poorly, Ronald Jones doesn't really show much. There's room for Keyshawn Vaughn to grow. The hit rate on round 3, and what's always really concerned me about this, and there's another running back that we can probably talk about in this context, only about 10% of round 3 guys hit in year 1, right? So as a starting point, the odds that they get a big chunk of work in year 1 and then hit is pretty low. And so what you look at is these guys coming into the NFL, it's about 40% is what your hit rate is in round 3. It only drops to 36% if they miss in year 1. Right?
It's really about year 2, year 3. That's really the sweet spot where they're coming, but they're most viable on their rookie deals to their NFL teams to start producing. And a lot of times they might be coming in behind a veteran, behind a guy that's maybe finishing up his rookie contract, or there's an out, with whatever their contract situation is.
Yeah, totally. And when you sort of get into the second, when you get into that range, that actually becomes a discount. So if you get into the third round of rookie drafts and you can pick him up, you're out producing your
You're not
hit rate
burning
on
the
him.
spot until you get him too. I mean, you
Right.
didn't burn the spot from May through if you get him in October, November, whatever.
Right. Yeah, totally. So yeah, your hit rate on running backs is going to be significantly higher in the first, in the first in the first round of rookie drafts, and then you sort of, which he never warranted, right? But when he sort of skips down to the third round of cost, that actually becomes a discount. So that would be something I'd be looking to do, whether it's for a third round pick or a third round equivalency. That would be an action plan that I would look to put into place.
Yeah. And it may not happen after week one, and this is, you got to give it time. And when you realize if Vaughn is firmly behind, even if he's ahead of McCoy or something, if he's behind Fournette firmly, he's behind Ronald Jones firmly, that's enough to say, is he really going to get two guys out of the way and get some clear run of things later in the season? But you get that for a few weeks or into the bye week gauntlet, and folks are looking, Dynasty GMs are like, man, I can clear this spot of Keyshawn Vaughn. I made a mistake, but I took him at 205, or whatever, or 203. And then you're like, well, now I can get out for a third. I clear the spot, and so that can sort of appear at the time for the rest of the season. But again, it can seem like a win-win, but like you're saying, we're just accruing profiles. We're accruing sort of long-term portfolio type stuff of building it together. Well, now Keyshawn Vaughn, you paid minimal for. You're going to go into the offseason, probably hold him. Let's see how this goes. If Rojo's back, if Leonard Fournette's back, I mean, it's possible, depending on the depth, maybe he doesn't make your week one roster, but you took a third round spec on, maybe the perfect storm late in the season happens, and let's see how the offseason goes. If there's no positive buzz, he's still behind. There's no, you don't have a lot of sunken cost of a third round rookie pick being the difference and being like, oh, I can't cut this guy, because you're the secondary owner. It's like a used car. You're much more willing to cut bait than that new car smell in your driveway, and you're like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
This is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 20 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. I want to remind you to never miss a moment by subscribing to the Football Guys show content on Football Guys TV on YouTube. New time tonight, but we'll be back in our regularly scheduled broadcasting hour. Most of you are on the podcasting network, so please subscribe, rate, and review all those podcasting platforms, and subscribe to the Football Guys daily email update by Joe Bryant. Trust me, this is the year you need it. If you've said, you know what, I collect my own news. I have a feeling Wednesday through Sunday, and heck, maybe even, checking in over and over again and having those breaking news, that 90 minutes before kickoff, Jordan, we're going to get a test and see how it looks this week, but also in future weeks with the testing going throughout weeks. This is going to be interesting. And again, you want to be on top of it. Footballguys.com/free. So get on that free daily email list. And do what I mentioned. There are still spots available in the FFPC main event. You can co-own with others for a team. But right now at the Football Guys promo, you get $100 off. So again, it has to be your first entry into the main event, but use promo code FBG100, and you can go over to myffpc.com and find main event. It's plastered everywhere over on that site. So you want FBG100 to get that $100 discount. And Jordan, I wanted to ask you about I mentioned in the opening, we have David Njoku, sitting at third on his own depth chart. So Harrison Bryant, nice prospect. He is day 3 though. I got to ask, for those of us that we love those first round tight ends, there's a potential dynasty roster squeeze here with David Njoku. Like, where you own him, where if you get questions about him, where's the line where you say, I know I'm going to be playing the waiver wire. It's a start one league, whether it's 1.5 or not. I mean, FFPC is what I'm thinking of. I mean, if you got David Njoku right now as your tight end 2 or 3, let's say 3 is like, you got 3 tight ends in a start one, but 20-man rosters, even if you go up to 22, 24, man, I'm already envisioning even getting through a couple weeks of the waiver wire. And if Njoku, now if you can hold him to week 1 and see if this is true, see what his snaps are in week 1, but he strikes me as a very, high variance player on what you might think of him based on how week 1 goes alone.
Yeah, I was doing waivers last night, and honestly, the first week of waivers is just, it's, especially if you had rookie drafts and they're just opening up, it's daunting, right, to get through. I'm glad it's here, but it's can be daunting in terms of all the moves you have to make. And that was a decision that I sat and thought a lot about. Is him as tight end 3? Can I keep him? Right? Can I do that? It's 25-man rosters, and I mean, what can I sell him for? It's virtually nothing. Do I think he's going to get picked up? Maybe, right? Maybe is the answer to that. I don't. I can't guarantee that. I don't think there's a seller's market for it. So, am I going to play him? It's just tough to hold him. And that's not to say that I wouldn't try and acquire him, in a different situation if I had more roster spots, or that he wouldn't be a priority add or something like that. Or if I got into a situation where I was, turning over my roster in season and I was sort of, looking for some more developmental pieces, that he wouldn't be a part of that. But as I sit here right now, I mean, I'm looking at some of these running backs that I need to get in terms of one injury away guys. And, if one of those running backs hits, that's a big difference in terms of warp, in terms of impact in a week. If Austin Hooper retires tomorrow, I'm not really sure how big of a David Njoku bump we're going to get in terms of what his starter rate would be, what his snaps would be, what his points ultimately would be, where I have a really good feeling about that at the running back position. So making that trade-off, it seems counterintuitive with the first round tight end who is actually hit, because that's a pretty dense situation, but I just can't justify it right now because I don't think the snaps are going to be there. And that's in a more shallow league, right? If it's 28, 30-man rosters, I think he's warranted a roster spot there, but 20 to 24, I think you're going to be hard pressed to hold on to him.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking while you're talking, when you mentioned, 28, 30-man roster, here's what I was thinking. Here's what he does, though, and I would be curious your thoughts, because tight end is in a high-scoring position. If you're going 2 PPR, I mean, obviously it raises the tide there for everybody. But let's say you got a firm, this is my starter type guy, top 5, top 6, top 7, someone like that. Then you've got David Njoku as one of your other guys. It almost seems like you have to have, or maybe you don't, another tight end of saying, well, if I actually, if I have a bye or injury to my top guy, then am I starting David Njoku? He literally, he might be a 20% snap guy. I mean, he may be out there and his ceiling might be 2 or 3 targets. Could it be a touchdown? Sure. But I guess I would ask this. If it's really man, I'm missing out a little bit at running back, and do I need a third tight end of a guy that is good enough that I would start him over Njoku? But now you're burning 3 spots. Because to me, if that's your setting, I don't know if Njoku's going to make it for you, because if you're going to get close to bye weeks, or if there is an injury to your top guy and you still aren't going to start him because his usage is low enough, I don't know. It seems like early on you got to be able to pull that trigger and move, because otherwise I think you're going to get sucked in a little bit. Or Jordan, do you just say, you know what? I'm going to be rolling the dice at tight end. Just roll it with Njoku. If he puts up a 1, if he puts up a 4, he might put up a 10, it might be fine, but it's not highly impactful in most formats.
It's really not. And ultimately that tight end production, I did a study a couple of years ago of basically what the tight end 1 finish meant in a week. And it was almost entirely, if you had a touchdown at tight end, it was a 70% shot to get in, right? Because that's just where the line falls in terms of scoring. And that's with guys that's across the position, right? So if you get a touchdown, there's a pretty good shot you're going to be a top 12 play. So if he has the type of talent that I think you should bet on long term. And if there becomes a situation where I need to stream a guy, or I'm in a roster crunch and I sort of need to play somebody, and he's getting 25-30% snap share, I'm fine. He's the type that you should make that bet on. I think there's probably going to be other bets, maybe in a one-off sample that might be advantageous. But if that's sort of the population you're picking from, he's actually the type of bet historically that makes some sense there. And ultimately, I think we're going to see better days, but I'm not sure how much I can hold him. And I don't think it's going to be an uptick in price either from a market value perspective.
Rhetorical and leading the witness question alert here, Jordan. Do you have any thoughts, or maybe some bigger picture dynasty lessons to be had for future knowledge base of Hakeem Butler, released by the Cardinals, not even brought back to the practice squad by the Cardinals in a year where they have an expanded practice squad, and how he was valued very early on in his dynasty marketplace?
Well, I have to compliment you in your questions because you did not lead me. So you asked a question you knew what the answer to it was, but you didn't lead me. So
What's that called in legal speak?
That was about a compound question, but that's a good. You ask an open-ended question of me, right? You ask
that's what every lawyer does, though, right? You should only ask the questions you know the answer to, right?
Oh yeah.
I saw that in
the
movies.
answer.
That's based on nothing. But never ask a question where you don't know what they're going to say.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So you had a good one. I mean, we don't. Yeah, and it's not going to be fatal here if you don't know the answer, but you knew the answer to this one. I find this time of year to be sad, but honestly, it's a trend that every year we see, which is the buzz day 3 wide receiver candidates that everyone is talking up as upside guys. Every time you get a waiver wire notification in your inbox from your provider of choice of Dynasty, it's littered with day 3 wide receivers, right? I mean, that's what you see this time of year. You see day 3 guys cut, right? You see them cut by NFL teams, right? Put on practice squads, and here's what you get. It's a 5% bet. It's a 5% bet. And I get in an interesting, actually, Sig and I were talking on Twitter the other day about betting on outliers, right? Should you be trying to pick outliers? And for me, I think the best bet is to try and avoid the misses, right? Picking outliers is incredibly difficult. Reducing your miss rate is significantly easier, right? So that has been something for me that I think is pretty valuable, and that's a profile that I really try and avoid.
Sorry, I was losing it like 3 times when you just said avoid misses. I was like, I wanted to say bomb drop. You're dropping bombs over there. We want to avoid misses. That's groundbreaking stuff right there. No, but I get what you're saying. And again, when you look at probabilities, there's certain subsets of players, profiles and pedigrees and position combos there where it's like, man, you're just biting off a lot, and
right.
And Hakeem Butler, well, isn't Hakeem Butler the whole, like, we talk about, well, he's basically day 2. Well, you know what though? Like, well, no, because he's the first pick, I believe, in round 4,
right.
And we talk about that all the time, where it's like, well, but it wasn't. It's just like you kind of were, but you kind of weren't. It's kind of how it goes. But contract wise, allegiance wise, for NFL teams, those lines do matter. That does move the needle. And I was just thinking about all the things that have happened in Arizona since Hakeem Butler, that January was so highly regarded. It was a long time ago. Nope, not that long ago. Less than 2 years. And
these things move quickly, right?
Exactly. And it was like, oh, he can be the wide receiver 1. And then it turned into, he could take over for Larry Fitzgerald, but they've had, they had Christian Kirk, I believe, in that same class. You had, and since you had Andy Isabella this year, well, yeah. And then you also had you had DeAndre Hopkins, who just got an extension. So, I mean, that was probably the biggest, slam right there, slamming that door shut.
Isn't that a good example, though, of you have to adjust to pedigree, right? Because even if you're like, I think he's a really good a really good lesson. And sometimes we can think about players and think about, these specific stories and what do they tell us. I think this one's a really good example of if you have a player that we have a certain opinion on pre-draft, and that might be athletics, it might be production, it might be tape, whatever it is. We think that he's a top 5 wide receiver in this class, or a top 1 the best wide receiver in this class. Or really crummy, right? I mean, either extreme. And the NFL does something that's completely the opposite, especially when they pass on a guy, right? Because then that's 32 teams and not just one team making a mistake by drafting a guy higher. It's 32 teams passing on a guy for 3 straight rounds. You have to move towards that, right? So even if you come into a draft thinking, I think this guy's a fringe second round NFL draft pick, I have him in the mid first of my rookie drafts, when he falls, right, you have to move, right? You have to move that down the line to him being a 3rd round rookie pick, right? And I think a great way to avoid misses, right, to reduce your miss rate ultimately, and that's the best way to be more successful, is reduce the landmines.
Well, and you still don't want to take a day 3 wide receiver in round 3.
Right. That's still bad, but definitely don't do it in round 2, right? Don't take.
People were doing it with Hakeem Butler. Yeah.
Hakeem. Yeah, and I think
I got
there's
two
been like
examples. I got 2 examples for you. 2 guys that fit the exact same thing. Equanimeous St. Brown, big recruit, ends up almost falling out of the draft, and people still hanging on, saying he's great. And then the year before that, I had it. Malachi Dupree, same thing, fell out. Actually, he was one of the last picks of the draft, and people were holding on to those profiles because they were big Devy names, and that's part of the thing. They've been scouting them since they were high school, and now they get to the NFL, and they still want to view them. Oh, now I'm getting a super discount on the player that I would have drafted him X, if they were round 2. Well, they weren't round 2. They passed 5, 6, 7 times. So, but yeah, it's a very good tale. And unfortunately, well, actually, you know what I would say? The in-season market, and we'll talk about it as we go through the season, but it's some of my favorite dynasty trade market there is, because everything moves so fast. You really have these pockets of 3, 4, 5 days where this is the marketplace, and then everything can reset. Part of the deal, one of those players, one of the NFL teams can look completely different, ancillary injury, whatever it is. This is my favorite one, because you know what? Good luck mock drafting, good luck ADP, good luck by the time you get a quote unquote sense of the market, another game is being played across the NFL, and have fun. Have fun, because it just changed. And you know what? The offer you sent and they declined might be one that you wouldn't even offer because you don't like it the next week. And that's what I love about in season, because every week it's different. That's how you get a 2-week zone where Matt Jones is worth the first. You get a 2-week zone where someone's going to drop Odell Beckham his rookie year because he's hurt for 6 weeks. Like that's the microwave we're going to be in. And I can't wait for it, honestly. Do you have any maybe big picture thoughts about just dynasty trading over, these, especially the early parts of the season where we're still trying to find our way of what's an actual data point and what is still oscillating around before we know who's good, who's not good, what teams are good, good matchups, all these types of things.
Yeah, I think you start and you look at what the season-long projection is. I think you look at what your historical odds would have been coming into the season, and if something gets totally out of whack, right? If James Robinson goes for 35 points in week 1, right? I think you really regress towards what happened, right? Or regress towards what you projected, right? You regress towards his pedigree. You regress towards what the projections were coming into the year. I think that's an easy way to do it. And the other thing too that I always like to think about is when people are buying in-season production, right? That's a buffet that I want to feed, right? With whether that's Wayne Gallman last year, where people were buying for 2-week samples, they were buying him for second round rookie picks, right? I want to be in that business, because ultimately that's a huge success year over year when you sell those types of guys for those types of prices. So that's really the feed the urge that other owners have for, instant production. That's one thing I really like to do as well. And honestly, just bet on, we talk about base rates and density, right? Bet on those things happening, especially for slow starts and really quick starts, right? If it's a really high hit rate type of player that starts slow, that's an easy buy. And if there's a really low percentage player that starts really hot, right, that's a quick and easy sell typically. So.
And it goes through the opposite as well. If you got a high pedigree player, comes in, starts rocking, you know what happens? They go through the roof and they're untouchable. So 2 players that look like to be good to go, all systems for week 1. And I'm really happy about it, because last year we didn't get a lot of either one of them. AJ Green, he's good to go. And that was a guy, contending bridge player. If he's good to go, and that offense is, let's face it, better than the direct they had at quarterback last year. Not saying Joe Burrow has to be great. Can he just be functional? I'm really looking forward to AJ Green and Mr. Will Fuller. Will Fuller on Thursday night against the Chiefs, Deshaun Watson. And we'll see about Brandon Cooks. It's a short week and he's dealing with a quad. So he could be limited. Maybe he would be good to go and 100% or close to it for Sunday. But He could be a little iffy for lineups, so that'll be interesting. Could be Randall Cobb, getting elevation here in week 1. But those are two guys that I wouldn't be surprised if either one of them puts up 25, 30 plus points in week 1 and really rights a lot of the wrongs, if you will, of the dynasty marketplace over the last 12 months. That the ire, let's call it the ire.
Let me ask you this on Will Fuller real quick. If I give him 16 games, what's the ceiling that he could? And
assuming he didn't exit the second quarter of every game.
Yeah, let's assume that he plays 16 games, 4 quarters of each game.
Yeah, I got you. I'll put his total points. I will say the worst he could do is like wide receiver 15. The worst.
What's an upside? Give me how high that could be.
1 overall.
Okay.
One overall. Want to know why?
Especially
because we saw the one game it was like one game he was fully healthy. What did he do? He went over 200 with 3 touchdowns. And he was uncheckable. Healthy Will Fuller is uncheckable and one of the preeminent deep threats, and yet he's worked on his intermediate game. You line up. I mean, are you going to press him? Probably not. So that means you can get hitches and comebacks any day you want. So and you got Deshaun Watson. You don't have Hopkins there. I mean, him with Fuller with volume just gets me all excited. I mean, like Fuller with volume. So again, my thing is stacking Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller and whatever hodgepodge of healthy games you get, because if one's out, the other one's projection should be through the roof. And there's just hedging with everybody on both players, and that to me is the wrong take.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Have a take of one of them, and again, if they're both healthy, they could both be in the top 12 for a week. That's not. Yeah. We saw Hopkins and Fuller do it. Why can't Cooks and Hopkins do it? All right, let's rapid fire a couple dynasty trades here. All right, we are trading Alvin Kamara, and this is post getting. Well, we're still looking at the contract angle, but he is going to play, and we have about the spinal injection, all of those things. Alvin Kamara for Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and a first next year that 8 Devi are already owned. So a little depletion there.
Kamara.
Okay. Jeudy could get there. Jeudy could actually absolutely be a core level player, but yeah, that's pretty light for what Kamara can provide now. FFPC, we've got Mike Evans, Eric Ebron in premium for Travis Kelce and Emmanuel Sanders.
Man, that's a lot of I'm going Kelce Sanders, even though I love Evans.
Oh man, we disagree.
Wow.
No, mostly because I really like Eric Ebron. And when you get premium,
right.
So we're going discount. I think he could be top 10. I think with Ben Roethlisberger healthy, I think he could be top 10. And so yeah, Kelce is a rare commodity. You could go just one tight end on your roster where maybe you wouldn't, but we know starting tight ends are available in FFPC. So give me Evans, lock that wide receiver spot up, because you know what? Then we can go like 3 wide receivers on our roster, Jordan.
That's pretty good.
All right, 14-teamer. We got Kamara, non-PPR, Kamara, Swift, and Pittman for Saquon Barkley.
Wow. Man, that's I'm going Barkley.
Yeah, me too. I like Swift, but you know what? I don't like him as much in non-PPR as PPR. And Michael Pittman, he's an absolute, no offense, but he doesn't even matter to this deal. Don't register him as part of it. And we got one more. We got a 2 QB special. We got some tight end premium in 12-team. Teddy Bridgewater, starting quarterback, got a little bit of allegiance there with a contract this offseason for Carolina. And we got Harrison Bryant. And this is on a non-contender. And they have 3 other quarterbacks, so they're trading Bridgewater away for Paris Campbell and JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
It seems like with the quarterback you could get better. Would be my thought. I think I don't love any player in this deal. I think Bridgewater's the most valuable and the best one. Even though I'm not a huge fan, it just feels like you can get better for a quarterback.
And they didn't say super flex. So you got 2 quarterback mandatory. I'll say this. I mean, I don't care if you're not a contender. Who cares? You got to leverage the market more than this. I mean, now maybe you really like Campbell. I would imagine that's the case more than Arcega-Whiteside. But you got to leverage it. Wait till in season until people start really hurting with the 2 with the 2 quarterback mandatory. And really leverage that. And week 4, week 6, he's still going to be the starter. It's not like there's no pressure on him. And Carolina's defense should stink. The volume should be pretty good. So I just felt like you bailed somebody out for a couple wide receivers and of day 2 variety. No thanks. I mean, I don't care if he's your wide receiver 4 and you have 4 quarterbacks and 1 other player of note on your whole roster and everything else is trash. I still wouldn't do it. Get better is what I would say. All right. One final reminder, subscribe, rate, and review the Football Guys shows through your listening apps. Sign up for the Football Guys daily email update at footballguys.com/free. In this episode, we discussed a lot of the latest news, previewed some of our thoughts for week 1, go over Dynasty strategy for GMs out there. And next time we get together, Jordan, we will have luxurious football to discuss. We didn't even have preseason. We're going to get right to the main course here of 2020 meal of football. We're going to have actual overreaction theater, we call it, right? I believe, talking about the one game sample size. And until then, I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. Good luck in your Dynasty leagues.